This is Melissa with Haven Craft. This is part of our ongoing series of classes on traditional sort of blood and bone witchery that we started offering in October with our classes on necromancy and have continued through December with our classes on blood and snow and the folk religions and pagan religions that influenced our ideas about modern day wintertime. In particular, today is our crafting class that goes along with the classes we've recorded so far on blood and snow, which should be up on our YouTube channel within the next couple of days. If you are a patron, you're getting to see this video. I believe I set it up so that it will be 3 days before anyone else. Now today what we are making are Holly Kings. So you can see my little guy with his walnut face and his crown of holly and ivy and pine and his holly staff and his outfit of holly and ivy and pine and his phallic symbol here, which is made of mistletoe. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this and about the history behind them. And just keep in mind that this is part of a broader series. Now, before I do that, I want to clarify a couple of things. I have to do my spiel, and I have to do my disclaimers. Spiel number 1, Haven Craft is a non-profit organization that is interfaith, intercultural, interdenominational, intersectional, and inclusive. What this basically means is that we provide education, advocacy, counseling, and assistance during domestic crisis, and that we also teach people of different faiths, traditions, cultures, religions, spiritual paths, and walks of life how to provide safety, security, and support for each other. Basically, we feel that everybody can learn to get along and to help each other out when times are tough. And that's our whole purpose. Because of this, we ask that while you are here, regardless of what you believe, you be respectful of everyone else's beliefs. In this space, the only thing that we are intolerant of is intolerance. We will respect your presence here as long as you respect the existence of everyone else here. And we ask that you remember that we welcome all who welcome all. Okay? Cool. Secondly, although we are an interfaith center, these classes in particular are being taught from the position of my faith, the faith that I grew up in. And so there's definitely an Appalachian bent to these particular classes. If you want to observe these classes as a matter of academic curiosity, as a matter of an atheist, an agnostic, a spiritually seeking person, or a spiritualist, you're welcome to do so. You don't have to believe what I believe.
But this is a class from one perspective.
So
it's how to make a thing.
It is how to make a thing. And I grew up making these things. So yeah, you can go ahead and start lashing, and then eventually I will film the lashing technique. So Ian's going to be lashing for some of the dolls in the background, and then we will move on. So this comes from an old Germanic, Scandinavian tradition, also an Irish tradition, that started out as actual death magic. The idea was that one person died in order to ensure the survival of everyone else.
Yeah.
That person, that sacrifice, was said to water the ground with their blood and ensure that in spring there would be warmth and summer and fertile land again. Now, over time, this ritual shifted. In certain areas, it became a sex magic ritual. In Ireland, in particular, it changed from being a death magic thing where Air, the goddess of Ireland, the ground itself as a goddess, would come back to life from someone dying. They instead did that whoever was the king had to go have sex with a representative of air, and in so doing would bring her back to life in spring. In Scandinavia, they started doing animal sacrifice, primarily goats. And there is some theory that the tradition of the Christmas tree dates all the way back to when the Vikings would hang dead bodies on poles. And that would be the blood draining down the poles would be what brought the ground back to life. Now, eventually, this became goats that were hung on the poles. And then after that, it became greenery and boughs of things like holly and ivy that was hung on the poles, which is where we get the whole decking of the halls with these things. Now, there's also the theory that the decking of the halls with the holly and the ivy actually dates all the way back to Saturnalia, and that the Romans would not allow the Christians to hang up their decorations for certain holidays, so they started hanging up what the pagans were hanging up so that they could get away with practicing their religion, and eventually it just became part of the religion. There's a lot of different theories.
Back in the day when Christianity was actually an oppressed religion.
For more details about those cultures and those beliefs, you can actually look at our other classes on blood and snow. Today is just the crafting class, so I'm just touching on it really quickly. In particular, what we're making is what became a stand-in for the human sacrifice. Instead of actually killing someone, certain pagan and spiritual religious traditions started making an effigy of something to be sacrificed. In some cultures, it's a goat in effigy that is made of like grass and sticks.
The Finnish Christmas goat?
Yes, the poor Finnish Christmas goat. So there's this Finnish city that keeps building a giant effigy of a goat every Christmas to represent the goats that used to be sacrificed. And every freaking year, this poor thing burns down.
Or gets stolen, or gets
So there's you can actually read the Wikipedia page about the Finnish Christmas goat and all the many, many ways it has been destroyed.
It's kind of hilarious.
I kind of think, just personally, that it's sort of the gods keeping the tradition of the effigy being burned around. Because they're sort of building it as a statue to honor the fact that these effigies used to be burned, and before that these goats used to be killed.
And then they don't burn it.
And then they don't burn it.
It's supposed to go into storage if it survives.
But now it just keeps getting burned down anyway, so I kind of think the gods are having their, like, oh no, this is supposed to get burned. Like, this is ours.
You'd think that the people in charge of that would realize that by now.
And just burn one, right?
Yeah, and just be like, well, you know what, let's make it a town event and just burn this thing.
Actually, it gets even more fun because after the first few catastrophes, there started being a second group that would make them as well. And so then there were 2 Finnish Christmas goats, and things would happen to both of them. And occasionally they would sabotage each other.
Yeah, so,
it's kind of awesome.
It's a fun story. I recommend looking it up. Also, in case you're ever curious, Finnish sniper. There's a really fun story about a Finnish sniper called the White Death that I heartily recommend everybody read.
Someone who went on like a 3-day cocaine bend?
No, that's a different Finnish skier. So anyway, these get called Holly Kings, or in one of my families, these are one of the Jacks. So I'm going to talk about the difference between that. So in one of the traditions that I learned from, this is an effigy of the Holly King. And the Holly King has dominance over one half of the year, and the Oak King has dominance over one half of the year. And at the equinoxes, they duke it out. And every time, first the Oak King must lose and the Holly King must win. And then it changes and the Holly King must lose and the Oak King must win. And when it is time for the Holly King to lose, you burn these. And when it is time for the Oak King to lose, you burn a different effigy, the one that you make of corn for the phallus and sunflowers and other things that represent the warm period of the year. I've done some fun ones of those with giant onions for the testicles and a big corn cob for the phallus. They're fun.
Right, it's sexual.
Well, I mean, like the ones that I participated in, sex was part of the ritual. Everybody kind of did a party around the effigies and drank and ate a lot, and then people snuck off into the bushes and everybody knew what they were getting up to.
It's just part of the ritual.
It's just part of the
And
ritual.
you had old women with sticks coming around and making sure that everyone was happy with their partner.
Right, and everything was consensual. I think I was probably 11 or 12 the first time I made a miniature one of these, rather than one of the giant ones. And then the last time I made a giant one of these was actually out here. One of the circles out here was like, hey, you know, Melissa, we heard that you used to do this with your family and that you miss it. Well, we're making a giant one of these. Do you want to come out and help? And that was really nice. So,
I think, if I recall correctly, I helped build it and you helped dress it.
Yep. These, in particular, you keep around your house as a ward against evil spirits and to keep the green in your home, keep prosperity in your home, keep stability and fertility in your home through the winter. And just a reminder that fertility in this case doesn't really mean having kids. It's the idea of a fertile field, a fertile new year. There are different idols that are specifically to bring that kind of fertility, like a fertile womb. But the idea that fertility only meant a fertile uterus is relatively new.
Well, a fertile human uterus, I mean.
Right.
Fertile
animal uteruses. Yeah. So
they were considered part of the harvest.
And then at the equinox, you burn him. And by then, he should be nice and dried out and easily thrown into one of the bonfires. In the case of this being one of the jacks...
Is it autumn equinox that you burn them? Or what?
No, this one would be burned at spring equinox. In the case of this being interpreted as one of the jacks, rather than one of the kings, you burn it at the new year, which is not the 1st of January. It's when the thaw happens. As soon as water starts running again, you burn him. But that's where, in the jacks, the year is divided into 4 sections, not 2. The jacks come from the idea that there are these archetypal figures that each get 1/4 of the year. This would be Jack Frost. Then you move into Jack Green. Then you move into Jack Corn. And then you move into Jack Lantern. And Lantern Jack is actually what Jack the Pumpkin King in Nightmare Before Christmas is based off of. So that movie always has special significance to me because I actually work with that figure. In particular, Jack Frost represents the frost that comes along before the killing freeze. And the frost blankets everything in a protective bubble that holds the warmth in. And then that warmth protects it from the much colder time that follows and stops the plants from actually dying.
Right. It's the difference between a frost and a hard freeze.
Yeah, you want a frost before you get your first hard freeze, definitely. And Jack Frost is not this young, mischievous figure. The original Jack Frost...
You're thinking Rise of the Guardians.
Yeah, the original Jack Frost was one of the good neighbors, one of the friendly folk under the hill, and was not a little mischievous youngster, and I'm not sure where that came about.
I think it was to make him less terrifying.
Yeah,
like, the original Jack Frost is...
I mean, you give him blood sacrifices at the beginning of winter in order to ensure that he actually lays down his blanket of frost. And then he's said to be moving during this time period, and then he's murdered to become the next Jack, and his body goes to restore the crops. So, it's just a different story. It's a different culture. I've used them for either one. I don't really care what you do, whether you build a Holly King, whether you build a Jack Frost. or whether you want to instead build a ward against the evil forces and sort of something to bring the goodness of the hunt that rides during this period of year, in which case you would actually build a stick, a log, covered in the pine, the holly, the ivy, and the mistletoe, and then you would prick your finger and drop a couple drops of blood onto it, and then just sit that in the windowsill. So I'll make one of those during this class as an example of something else you could make. In fact, I'll do that next. And we'll just go ahead and record the making of these. So if you at home want to make one, you can make one too. So the supplies that you are going to need if you're going to make this guy is sticks. I used birch because I associate it with Christmas time. You could use pine, fir, cedar is traditional. Yew is super traditional, but as a reminder, it is deeply poisonous. So if you get the saps on your hands, be careful not to touch your eyes, your nose, your mouth, or any other mucous membranes, and wash your hands before you eat. And don't inhale the dust. Anyway, moving right along, you're going to need holly. I made mine a little holly staff, but you could make it a holly crown. You could glue holly on to his belts. It doesn't...
Gonna make a note here. If you do glue things, make sure it is a glue that you can burn.
Yeah, make sure it's a
it.
glue that you can burn, or make sure that you are burning it in a very safe, well-ventilated environment where you are not close to the fire, so if the glue pops, it doesn't hurt you.
Yeah. Because that can go really wrong.
We use walnut faces. When I grew up, we used black walnuts, but black walnuts are very hard to get in their shells. Out here, and in particular if you break open the shells and carve in them like we just did, they contain an irritant which can irritate your skin, irritate your eyes, and make you sick. And so, you know, this time we used English walnuts. And we just make a little face. We crack it open and we pop the meat out, and we put two eyes. Yeah, we eat it. You put two eyes, and those eyes are going to be how you tie it onto the stick. I have all my greens, so my holly berries, my ivy, my pine. You could use whatever falls off your Christmas tree. If you're using a Christmas tree, the branches that you cut off to make it fit are perfect for this. You do not have to run out and buy special materials for it. So I'm going to go ahead and first demonstrate making one of these that is for, which do you think for a size for a log? The bigger one or the shorter one?
Probably the bigger one.
Okay, so this is going to be my log. It's a little skinny, but
it's what we've got.
It's what we've got.
Yeah.
You can make a bigger one.
In fact, I encourage it. Just, you need a log as opposed to a stick, which is what we've got right now.
My branch of pine.
Your bough, if you want
my
to be
bough,
poetic
if I
about it.
want to be poetic. And then I've got another one to point the other direction just because I'm fussy, not because it's necessary. And I'm just kind of weaving this around. It does not have to be perfect. And then I have hemp. I always use hemp cord. You could use sinew. You could use cotton string. You could use kitchen twine. You could use silk thread. Don't use zip ties.
One, it's kind of disrespectful. Two, when it burns, that will be bad.
Yeah. Noxious smoke, bad for the environment. Thank you. Get me off two more.
Do you want to do it in loops, or do you want to do it trussing style?
I've just been doing it in loops.
Okay. Then have a bit for a loop.
Thank you.
That should be long enough. And have another bit for a loop.
So these just get put in your windowsill.
And she's literally just tying it on at intervals with twine that's going around the log and the greenery and getting done up in a square knot, right?
Yeah. Nothing fancy.
So, you do
They
not...
smell wonderful.
Right, you do not need to get super fancy with this.
And normally the log would be a little bigger.
Right, normally this would be a proper log. What we have here is a stick. You can improvise and imagine.
Yep. They don't have to be perfect.
In fact, they won't be, and that's okay.
That's kind of the point.
Like, perfection is not what you're going for. You're going for earnesty.
Yep. Point is respect. Acknowledging that this is their time of year.
So she is now grabbing some of the ivy greenery that we have here. We actually went and we couldn't find any other ivy, so we purchased ivy wreaths that had been pre-made with living ivy and are deconstructing them. They're very pretty.
Yes. And if we don't end up using all of it, I will end up using one of these at home.
Do you need the scissors?
Yeah, I'm gonna. Thank you. So weird to me that like none of the nurseries had any. I ended up having to go to Trader Joe's.
We're in Vegas. Do you want to get back on camera so that this is visible?
Yeah.
Here, I'll
So
hold it up.
I'm literally knotting on.
Right, she's tying a strand of ivy around the log bundle.
And I didn't even have to use any twine because ivy's a vine. So I just tied it to itself.
Right, green ivy can in fact
Gonna
be
cut
used
me
as basic
one more of
cordage.
those.
What for?
The other end. I'm doing 3s.
Oh, of the ivy. I thought you meant of the this, and I was really confused.
Nope. Sorry, table rocked. Rock, rock, rock. So you can see I've just... Da-da-da. And then you want to break me off some of those sticks of berries.
Yeah, how much do you want?
So, about like that. Maybe break me off 3 little pieces. And then I'm going to get a mistletoe. Sadly, my mistletoe has no berries. It's very odd to me.
Also the object, which is the real reason that they don't have any.
I was sad.
It's hard
Yeah. Like, we can't go gather this stuff out here.
Just learn to like go get some desert mistletoe.
Yeah, I have desert mistletoe and oh geez, little berries. I'm losing berries. So
Oops.
I'm just gonna tie these on too. So in this particular case, when you do these and you set it on your windowsill through December as a ward against evil spirits, I was always taught that on Christmas night you burned it. And that it was part of your Christmas fire. And I was taught that this is why we went out and we did big bonfires, was to honor the hunt and to give them their sticks that you had sitting in the window. And in particular, we always bled on them. I've been reading a little bit online about other people's pagan traditions at this time of year in order to construct the Blood and Snow class, and I was surprised to read that a lot of people say that the red berries are the blood and that you don't have to bleed on them. I'm just losing my berries. These are very ripe. The berries are just falling off. Yeah, and I mean, you know, to each their own. If you don't want to bleed on it,
Then don't.
don't. I'm gonna, cause... So, funny thing, we're, here at Havencraft, and I get a phone call from someone who's like, do you carry goats? And I was like, no.
Like whole goats?
Like a whole goat? And he's like, yeah, like a goat for the holiday. And I was like, no, I mean, like, I can put you in contact with some farms, or, you know, I know if you don't want to kill it yourself, the Chinese market in town sells half a frozen goat. And he's like, no, I mean, like, the wicker and the grass ones. And I was like, it's like an effigy of the sacrifice. No, we don't sell those, but you know, I'd be happy to help you make one. And he's like, you know what, I'm gonna call around the other stores, maybe someone carries one, and if all else fails, I'm sure I can make one myself. And I was like, all right, have fun. And I hang up and someone's like, did that guy want a goat? And I was like, oh no, you wanted like an effigy of a goat. And he's like, then why were you trying to sell him a real goat? And I was like, because that's what my family did. We killed a goat. We bathed in its blood. We cooked him. We ate him. Like, that was a thing. So when someone called and asked me for a goat, I thought they meant, could I procure an actual goat for them? I was very confused.
Cultural differences.
Yes. Is this part of the chicken is the line? I shouldn't talk about the fact that we kill chickens for exorcisms?
Only sometimes.
Only sometimes. Okay,
So
I have on my red berries.
And then you literally,
I'm gonna add my mistletoe.
The whole thing?
Yep.
Are you sure?
I mean, I could do just a little bit of it.
I'm just counting out how much mistletoe we have versus...
I'll add just a little bit of it.
So she's adding a little bit of mistletoe, and then we're going to have one completed log, and then we're going to film on camera the basic steps for how you do assemble one of these. And then we're gonna help people who are here make these. And turn off the camera for that part, because there's really no point.
True.
But we can walk everyone through how to do it at the same time.
Alrighty. I'm just gonna put a pretty bow, because I wanna.
Okay, you do that.
Alrighty.
So, she has her log. Blood will be added later.
Yep.
And it's going to get set aside.
And then I may actually just tie this whole thing to a log.
Yeah.
Because it's already put together. I'm worried I'll lose all the berries if I try and pull it all off this and transfer it to a log. So, alrighty. For the record, no, I don't celebrate Yule, and I'm aware of the similarities between this and a Yule log. It's almost like a lot of these cultures syncretized and blended into each other. Alrighty.
So, let us demonstrate how you do this.
I am going to actually switch the method that this is. Oh, I can't. Okay, so we'll just.
You should be able to.
You're gonna.
I'm not sure how.
Don't worry about it for now.
Okay.
So, first step, you want to get to one of these. Yes, it's a cross. It's also a useful skeleton of a figure. Can you pause this for a second?
There we go. Is it recording now?
Yeah.
First things first, I need to make my lashing. Just start it on this stick. I am nowhere near as good at this part as Ian is, but we will get it done regardless. You make an X, like so, and then you pass the end of your string.
You know what, I'm gonna move this around a little bit so that it's actually like a better angle. Am I angling this correctly? Let's see. Ah! Okay. Let me just I'm trying to get like over your shoulder look so that they can see from that angle. There we go.
Excellent. So I made an X, and you can see that I put the end of my X underneath it. And then I'm going to just pass over that a couple of times, which is how it stays secured. And I'm just keeping it nice and taut while I do that. So you want to do this enough down your person that there is room for one of the faces and for a crown. So you can see the space that I've given that. Alright. That's nice and tight. Then you give it its arms, which you do by first going over, under, over, under,
Camera's doing weird things as I pick stuff up.
over, under, remind everyone, if we get to a certain amount of patrons, I'll buy a better camera setup. Oh, thank you. That's not aimed at any person in particular. So I am really traditional about these, and I do each part of this 3 times. So that was 3 times for each of those. And then you go the other direction. So over this center one, under the arms, over the center one, under the arms. So that was 1, 2, 3. Oh, this is the 3rd pass. Okay, and I like to make my X. 1, 2, 3. Make sure that's nice and tight. And then 1. Sorry, Tina.
I'm just like, angles.
Would it help you if I moved to another chair and you could stand behind me?
I don't know.
Okay. So you can see 3 times around each way. And then up at the crown is where I like to tie it on. I am traditional like that. Ooba-doo. Joy and cheers. So you can tie it up, you can finish off your tie with a clove hitch or a loop or whatever you prefer. Just make sure it's nice and tight. Enough to hold it together through gentle use through till the holiday when you intend to burn it. So you can tie your head on first or dress him first. I prefer to dress him first because I find that if I'm fiddling too much, I knock the head off anyway. Alright, so you're going to take your boughs that you cut off your Christmas tree, or if you're not having a Christmas tree, around this time of year, different places sometimes just have these. This bundle that I got was kind of nice because it has different kinds of evergreens. And that's specifically what you want, is evergreens. So, what did I do with my knife? Knife.
Here.
Where's my knife, though?
I don't know, but right now, aren't you filming?
Yeah. So, I'm just gonna cut some of these
It's underneath the scissors.
to be his dress, his robes, whatever you want to call it. It really doesn't matter. I've heard it referred to as his body. I've heard it referred to as his clothing. Kind of whatever. Like.
Right. Think of it however you really want to.
So, I have cut a pile of greens, and I'm just going to arrange it so it passes over what becomes his torso and down over what is his body. And you just do this however looks good to you. There really isn't a right way or a wrong way to do this. There's just your way to do this.
Is that knife iron?
This is a knife made from a horseshoe.
That's cool.
Sweeping in here is going to be important.
Yes. Especially with Munchkin spending a lot of time in here.
So I am just dressing him in different kinds of evergreens, whatever you like. whatever smells good to you, whatever you don't have to spend a whole lot of money to get, because that's kind of missing the point. You know, you're not supposed to bankrupt yourself for these. And I'm just going to pass my hemp around to make a sash. And that is going to be what ties on his clothing. Now, if you want to make a non-gendered deity, you can do that. If you want to say these forces are not gendered, that is entirely up to you. Traditionally, this is a male deity, but I don't care. You do you.
Right, you do you.
Can you take a camera turn?
Yeah, her arm is getting really tired. I'm now going to add on his phallus.
I'm not a martial artist.
I was going to say we need to work on your isometrics.
So I am adding on the mistletoe as the phallus. Different people do this differently. My grandmother liked to tuck it up under the evergreen so it looked like it was peeking out from underneath the robe. I always just tie it on because I'm like, it's body.
Right, it kind of depends on how you're thinking about the evergreen.
But I'm just tying on.
And essentially you just tie this on however you can. There's not a particular set of knots that are the most effective.
So I have a bit of string here, which I'm going to use to create the crown for this one.
So you can, if you choose, make the crown entirely out of holly or ivy or whatever. In this particular case, she went away, so I'm going to show you my face while I talk for a second. In this particular case, we're doing a combination of the evergreen and the ivy, correct?
Yes.
And there's a certain level of symbolic relevance to what you choose to use for the crown.
Yes, but it's also just
what you have available. Alright, I'm gonna pull a Bob Ross here. It's your effigy. You should be happy with it. So, she's essentially winding the ivy around.
And I'm actually,
the very
in
top
this
of that
particular
stick.
case, I think I'm just going to use the ivy.
Okay.
Because I think it looks nice. On my other one, I did both. You know, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to pass my bit of string through this mess. Really, I am. I'm going to be smart.
And put the string down
put
first.
The string on first.
That's probably a good idea.
Now you want to do this taut enough
that it will
does
stay
not
where
just
it
slide
is.
off.
Yeah.
Which is much easier the fresher these are.
Right, this is fairly fresh ivy, which makes this much easier to deal with.
And then I'm going to use my string
To
just tie it on.
To contain it into